The effect of ethnicity and social class on teachers' expectations. So far, we have described how students' ethnic and social class backgrounds influence their approach to and success with various learning tasks. Now, we would like to tell you how those and other characteristics often affect, consciously and unconsciously, the expectations that teachers have for student performance, and how these expectations affect the quantity and quality of work that students exhibit. This phenomenon has been extensively studied since it was first proposed in 1968 and is typically referred to as the teacher expectancy effect. By becoming aware of the major factors that influence teachers' perceptions of and actions towards students, you may be able to reduce subjectivity to a minimum, particularly with students whose cultural backgrounds are very different from your own. The teacher expectancy effect basically works as follows. On the basis of such characteristics as race, socioeconomic status, ethnic background, dress, speech pattern, and test scores, teachers form expectancies about how various students will perform in class. They subtly communicate those expectancies to the students in a variety of ways. Students come to behave in a way that is consistent with what the teacher expects. Research on the effects of teachers' expectancies. Given the obvious implications of the teacher expectancy effect for shaping student behavior, researchers have been investigating its validity and limits for the past 40 years. Research that has investigated the effect of teacher expectancy on classroom achievement and participation has generally found sizable positive and negative effects. For example, a study of several hundred low-income students between the ages of 9 and 16 found that both mothers' and teachers' expectations were positively related to students' expectations and students' perceptions of their own ability, and that students' expectations and ability perceptions were positively related to achievement. This study also found that low expectations by both mother and teacher had a negative impact on student achievement. In addition, it appears that teacher expectations are more likely to maintain already existing tendencies than to alter well-established behaviors drastically. For example, primary grade teachers react differently to students in the fast-track reading group than to students in the slow-track reading group. When working with the more proficient readers, teachers tend to smile, lean toward the students, and establish eye contact more often, and they tend to give criticism in friendlier, gentler tones than they use in the slow-track group. They often overlook the oral reading errors of proficient readers, and when they give corrections, they do so at the end of the sentence or other meaningful unit rather than in the middle of such units. And they ask comprehension questions more often than factual questions as a means of monitoring students' attention to the reading selection. In contrast, teachers correct less proficient readers more often and in places that interrupt meaningful processing of the text, give these students less time to decode difficult words or to correct themselves, and ask low-level factual questions as a way of checking on the students' attention. Teachers' body posture is often characterized by frowning, pursing the lips, shaking the head, pointing a finger, and sitting erect. Often unsolicited help and giving enthusiastic praise to black students may lead at least some of those students to infer that they have lower levels of academic ability. In some, through a variety of subtle ways, teachers communicate to students that they expect them to perform well or poorly, and then create a situation that is consistent with the expectation. As a result, initial differences between good and poor readers either remain or widen over the course of the school career. Pause and reflect. Have your experiences with members of ethnic or racial minority groups been similar to or different from what you have heard and read about those groups? Which source, personal experience, or ideas derived from others, most affects your expectations for minority students? Factors that help create expectancies. In addition to documenting the existence of teacher expectancy effects and the conditions under which they occur, researchers have sought to identify the factors that might create high or low teacher expectations. Here are some important factors taken from analyses by Thomas Good and Sharon Nichols, Douglas Riady and David Wright, Sonia Nito and Harriet Tenenbaum, and Martin Ruck, Bruce Torf, and Yong Zhao and Wai Zhu. Middle SES students are expected to receive higher grades than low SES students, even when their IQ scores and achievement test scores are similar. Teachers have the highest achievement expectations for Asian American students and more positive expectations for white students than for minority, meaning black and Latino students. Teachers direct more neutral and positive statements, such as questions and encouragement, to white students than to minority students, but they criticize all students equally often. Minority students are more likely than white students to be referred for discipline action or for more special education placement. Teachers tend to perceive children from low SES homes as less mature, less capable of following directions, less capable of working independently, and less likely to profit from a curriculum that emphasizes higher order thinking skills than children from more advantaged homes. Teachers who think of intelligence as a fixed and stable capacity are more likely to formulate negative and positive expectations of students than are teachers who think of intelligence as a collection of skills that can be shaped. Teachers are more influenced by negative information about students. For example, low test scores than they are by neutral or positive information. High-achieving students receive more praise than low-achieving ones. Attractive children are more often perceived by teachers to be brighter, more capable, and more social than unattractive children. Teachers tend to approve of girls' behavior more frequently than they approve of boys' behavior. It is important to bear in mind that these factors, plus others such as ethnic background, knowledge of siblings, and impressions of parents, usually operate in concert to produce an expectancy. The following suggestions for teaching will give you some ideas for combating the damaging effects of teacher expectancies, as well as other problems often faced by low SES and minority students. Suggestions for teaching: promoting classroom achievement for all students. Use every possible means for motivating educationally disadvantaged students to do well in school. Good suggestions for teaching educationally disadvantaged students come not only from those who teach them, but also from the students themselves. You may notice some overlap in the two following lists, but that only serves to strengthen the validity of the suggestions. David Gardner, who taught for 33 years in schools that had high concentrations of low-income and ethnic minority students, was able to motivate his students and raise their achievement levels by doing the following: setting high standards for students because he was convinced they were capable of meeting them, telling students every day, both explicitly and implicitly, that he believed they were capable of high levels of achievement, telling students that he would not accept poor quality work and would return it to them to be redone, avoiding helping students figure out how to meet the demands of a task when he or she was convinced they were capable of figuring it out for themselves, telling students that failure was inevitable yet acceptable because that's how we learn, making learning fun by using games that allow students to manipulate, physically or virtually, the game environment. According to the responses of almost 400 low-income inner-city middle school children and high school students, good teachers do the following: push students to learn by such actions as not accepting excuses for missed or late work, constantly checking homework, giving rewards, and keeping parents informed. Maintain an orderly and well-run classroom in which disruptions are kept to a minimum. Make themselves always available to provide a student with help in whatever form the student prefers. Some students, for example, want help after school, some during class, some individually, some by working with peers, and some through whole class question and answer sessions. Some students may ask for help only if they are sure that no one besides the teacher knows they are receiving it. Strive to have all students understand the material by not rushing through lessons and by offering explanations in a clear, step-by-step fashion and in various ways. Use a variety of instructional tactics such as group work, lecture, textbook reading, worksheets, whole class instruction, and hands-on activities. Make an effort to understand students' behavior by trying to understand the personalities and after-school lives of students. The anecdotal experiences of David Gardner and the survey responses of these high school students are supported by a study of 31 highly effective teachers in urban, low-income schools who did many of the same things. Their students had greater gains in English and math than the students of other teachers. We need to add, at last, a word about homework as a way to promote achievement. The amount of homework assigned to students over the past 15 years has increased, largely because of the need for increasing numbers of students to achieve state-mandated standards and comply with the provisions of the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001. Educators believe that increasing the amount of homework assigned to students would lead to higher grades and test scores. Does it? Not surprisingly, the main conclusion to be drawn from the research literature is that it depends on the student's grade level and how the homework is structured. Compared with peers who did no homework, there was a small benefit for late primary and elementary grade students, and only a moderate benefit or a modest benefit for middle school students. But this benefit occurred only when the homework was sufficiently easy that they could successfully complete all or most of it. As for high school students, any benefit they might receive from doing homework appears to depend on the outcome measure that is used. For final course grades in math and science, researchers found no relationship, but they did find a significant relationship for standardized test scores. Apparently, teachers assign the same kinds of problems for homework as are found on standardized tests. Use a variety of instructional techniques to help educationally disadvantaged students master both basic and higher order knowledge and skills. Research from the 1970s found that the classroom and standardized test performances of educationally disadvantaged students improves when teachers follow these 7 guidelines. Eliminate distractions and maximize the amount of time students actually spend working on a task. Establish high expectations in a classroom climate that supports achievement. Break tasks down into small, easy-to-manage pieces and arrange the pieces in a logical sequence. Have students work on specific exercises in small groups. Ask direct questions that have direct answers. Provide frequent opportunities for practice and review. Provide timely corrective feedback. Designing classroom instruction along these guidelines has both benefits and costs. The benefits are that students spend more time on task, success tends to be more consistent, and more students reach a higher level of mastery of content, knowledge, and skills. The main cost is the lack of transfer that usually occurs when knowledge and skills are learned as isolated segments in a non-meaningful context. A second cost is that students have few opportunities to interact with one another. If teachers combine the 7 guidelines just mentioned with current thinking about promoting higher order learning among at-risk students, they may be able to raise the basic level of educationally disadvantaged students and improve their ability to transfer what they have learned to a meaningful and realistic context. To accomplish this 2-pronged goal, a teacher should also do the following. Provide opportunities for students to apply ideas and skills to real life or realistic situations to make the lesson more meaningful. For example, after collecting and analyzing information, students might write letters to the mayor or city council requesting more street lights for increased safety at night or improvements to basketball courts and baseball fields. Allow students the opportunity to discuss among themselves the meaning of ideas and their potential applications. In making a request of a government official, students should be encouraged to discuss which arguments are likely to be most effective and how they would respond should the official turn their proposal down. Embed basic skills instruction within the context of complex and realistic tasks. Letter writing campaigns, for example, can be used to practice such basic English skills as vocabulary acquisition, spelling, punctuation, and grammar. Point out how classroom tasks relate to students' out-of-school experiences. One example is to draw attention to the basic similarities between poetry and rap music. Model for and explain to students the various thinking processes that are activated and used when one engages in a complex task. As you will see when you read Chapter 9, effective learners approach tasks strategically, which is to say they analyze the task, formulate a plan for dealing with it, use a variety of specific learning skills, and monitor their progress. These are fundamental learning processes that are almost never made explicit to students. Gradually ease students into the process of dealing with complex and realistic tasks. There is no question that the approach described in this list carries with it more risk of failure than was the case for the structured, small-scale approach of the 1970s. But much of this risk can be minimized by scaffolding, which we described in Chapter 2. As you may recall, in scaffolding, the teacher initially provides a considerable amount of support through explanations, demonstrations, and prompts of various types. As students demonstrate their ability to carry out more of a task independently, the scaffolding is withdrawn. Be alert to the potential dangers of the teacher expectancy effect. Concentrate on individuals while guarding against the impact of stereotyping. Myrna Gantner, an 8th grade teacher in an inner-city middle school near the Mexican border, learned the following lessons about treating her Latino students as individuals. Treat Latino students the same as you would treat any other student. When teachers believe that inner-city Latino students are less capable than other students, they tend to give them less time and attention. Students quickly notice these differences and may respond with lower quality work and more disruptive behavior. Don't prejudge students. If you believe that most Latino children use drugs, belong to gangs, or have limited academic ability, students will eventually become aware of your prejudice and act accordingly. Gantner's students said they were most appreciative of teachers who were interested in them as individuals and had high expectations for them and showed them how to achieve their goals. Don't ridicule or make fun of students' limited English proficiency. The best way to acquire proficiency in a second language is to use it frequently. Students will be less inclined to do so if they think teachers and other students will laugh at their mistakes. Remember that in addition to being a skilled teacher, you are also a human being who may at times react subjectively to students. Try to control the influence of such factors as name, ethnic background, gender, physical characteristics, knowledge of siblings or parents, grades, and test scores. If you think you can be honest with yourself, you might attempt to describe your prejudices so that you will be in a position to guard against them. Do you tend to be annoyed when you read descriptions of the exploits of members of a particular religious or ethnic group, for example? Try to think of a student independently of his or her siblings and parents.